I turned off the engine and let the quiet lie to me for a full 5 seconds. Then the lie broke. Music low thumping, not the kind you hear in the country, rolled over the ridge with the smell of generator exhaust and hot plastic. My dog, Scout, lifted his head in the passenger seat and gave me that look like, are we about to do something stupid again? I eased the truck around the bend, gravel crunching under the tires, and the world I left 2 days ago had been replaced by someone else's idea of paradise. The hayfield was no longer a hayfield, it was a scene. A runway of string lights staked into my soil, a portable stage built on pallets with black skirting, barricade fencing, zip-tied, 2 T-posts that hadn't existed yesterday, and a 12-foot vinyl banner flapping in the evening breeze. Founders Gala Pine Ridge Estates, subtext, presented by the Sunny Ridge HOA at the edge of my pond. They'd erected a sunset pier, their words, not mine, by laying cheap plywood over cinder blocks. I watched a man in a tuxedo and work boots roll a champagne cart past my fence line like he owned the horizon. I should have laughed. Instead, I tasted metal. A kid in a neon vest stepped into the beam of my headlights and windmilled his arms. Private event, he said into a headset that probably cost more than the feed bill for my goats. Parking is on the north lot. The north lot, I repeated. He pointed to a place that, unless my grandfather's map had been lying for 70 years, was my north pasture. I killed the lights and stepped out. This north lot, sir, he started, taking a breath like he was about to recite policy. HOA contracted space with the stop, I said. Say that last part again. Who contracted what? Sunny Ridge HOA, he said, eyes pinned to the script. It's community green space. Tonight is a permitted community green space, I said, rolling the syllables like a bad taste. Scout jumped down and sat beside my boot like a quiet promise. How many feet do you think you're standing on my side of that fence, son? He blinked. Sir, I'm just crew. Then you won't mind fetching whoever thinks they're in charge. He pointed toward the stage. A woman in a sequined blazer was directing a small army of men with clipboards. The PA cough-tested a microphone. Levels, 1, 2, 1, 2. Somewhere a fog machine exhaled like a dragon with asthma. I walked past a stack of rented chairs and heard a champagne cork ricochet off my barn wall. The sound flipped something in me I hadn't felt since we buried my father on this land, and the county tried to tell me where the headstone could sit. I didn't shout. Not at first. I went for the generator. There's a beautiful democracy too. A main breaker. You don't need a badge or a speech to make your point. You need fingers and a decision. I flipped the switch and the entire event shuddered into silence like a party that realized the parents were home. Music died. Lights went black. The sequined blazer whipped around and found me by the dull glow of a phone. Who are you? She demanded. The guy whose field you're trespassing on, I said. Oh, she laughed. A weaponized brittle sound. You must be Mr. Norris. The laugh stopped. You're early. Early to what? I asked. My own robbery. The HOA assured us. Which HOA? Sunny Ridge. I let the words hang there, like laundry you hate to see in your yard. Fetch them. She gestured over my shoulder like she was hailing a cab. A white SUV pulled up, fresh from a car commercial. The driver door opened and out stepped a woman in a cream suit that tried to behave like a peace offering. Perfect hair, perfect smile, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm like a verdict. She looked like the kind of person who called a neighbor complaint a conversation. Mr. Norris, she sang as if we'd rehearsed this. Pamela Voss, president of Sunny Ridge. We've sent you multiple notices. You've stapled flyers to my gate that said save the date. She smiled wider and the date is saved. Tonight is our founders' gala to benefit the Walking Trail Initiative. It's a community space. It's my field, it's our easement. I waited. I like to give people 3 seconds to adjust to reality. She used all 3 to not blink. No, it's not, I said. She slid a paper from the portfolio. Not a copy, an original. From the confident way she held it, a notary stamp glinted under the last smear of sunset. Conservation Access Agreement, she said, tapping the header. Executed by Eleanor Norris 15 years ago. My mother, I said. The paper wobbled because my voice was calmer than my pulse. Read me the middle name. I don't see how. Read it. She looked down. Eleanor May Norris. My mother didn't have a middle name. Pamela's smile didn't die. It retreated like a tide that promised to come back later with friends. We can discuss this in the morning, she said. Right now our guests are leaving. Phones raised as if disagreement had become a spectator sport. The fog machine burped one last ghost and then surrendered. I let my voice carry across the dark like a rope. This is private property, I said. I don't care what someone sold you. You bought air. You have 10 minutes to move every chair, cart and cocktail off my grass. On minute 11, I start towing. On minute 12, I called the sheriff, and I never bluff. Silence picked sides. It chose me. Pamela's face did a calculation and lost count. This will reflect poorly on you, she said. Low enough for only me to hear. Only if you write the reflection. They moved. Events have muscle memory, even in retreat. The stage disgorged gear. The champagne found coolers. The neon vest kid opened a line of cars that looked like a parade of apologies. When the last taillight winked out at the road, it stood where their banner had flapped and felt the night rush in like it had been waiting. Scout pressed his shoulder against my shin. "Good boy," I said, and meant it about both of us. At dawn, a cream envelope waited on my gate. The letter inside tasted like a lawyer even before I read the name at the bottom. Notice of assessment for obstruction of community easement. $500 per day. Violation of HOA peace provisions. Immediate remedy required. I put the letter on the kitchen table, poured coffee, and stared at the ridge where the sun peels back the land like you're unwrapping something you paid for. The first call I made was to the county recorder. The woman who answered had known my grandfather, my father, and the stubborn way the Norris men dealt with paper. "Lena," I said, "do you have anything in the books about a conservation easement on parcel 217-4B? I heard keys rattle like distant rain." "Not on your mother," she said. "Never recorded." You know I'd remember. People record births, marriages, and the kind of mistakes that bite them in court. Nothing here. "What about digital uploads?" I asked, thinking of the clean notary stamp that had felt like theater. She paused. "Let me check the unofficial side." Another rattle. "I do see an image file uploaded to our staging system 6 months ago, not the official record. Source tag says Pine Ridge Development Partners LLC developers," I said. "Not the HOA. "No, a sister with better shoes," she said. "You didn't get this from me. I never do." I called the number at the bottom of Pamela's letter. She answered like she had been waiting at the phone for the exact moment my anger caught a handle. "Pamela," I said. "We should talk about forgery, Mr. Norris," she said brightly. "We prefer a misunderstanding. Then you'd better get comfortable with the county understanding you into a corner." She made a soft clucking sound I suspect she practiced in a mirror. "We are all neighbors here. There's no need to escalate this. You escalated when you built a stage on my grass. I didn't build it. Mr. Norris professionals did. Licensed, insured. How comforting," I said. "Tell your professionals to keep their trucks off my fence line. And tell your treasurer that posting fake easements into county systems with a developer's login is not the neighborly version of a handshake." She went quiet long enough to count to 5 in a language that wasn't charm. "You're making a mistake," she said. "You'll find the community prefers leaders who aren't hostile. I prefer truth over newsletters." I hung up and drove down to see Grace because every fight needs a sword sharper than your own. She'd been a notary for 30 years and a fact-checker for God longer than that. She tilted the paper under the lamp, sniffed it like it might smell like lies, and then smiled. "Gel pen," she said. "We used to call that teenage ink. Your mother signed everything with a fountain pen that leaked grief on your father's pay stubs. Lena says it was uploaded by the developer, not the HOA," I said. "Strange how those two find each other," she murmured, stamping a statement with the confidence of a woman who never used gel pens. By noon, my lawyer Eli Carter had drafts in the pipeline: notice of dispute, demand to cease encroachment, intent to sue for fraudulent document creation, and a polite invite to have the county and state agencies observe. He was surgical, not theatrical. I liked that, but lawsuits are slow, and Pamela's letters implied that her clock ticked faster than mine. So I wrote a document of my own. It was 3 pages long with the plainest title I could contrive: Right of Passage License for Agricultural Operations. It granted access conditional, revocable, narrow as a needle through the very field she thought she owned, but only for the movement of agricultural equipment, livestock, and feed. No events, no structures, no guests, and a clause like a trapdoor. Any recreational or commercial use voids the license retroactively and triggers liquidated damages at a number that would make a treasurer hold her breath. I printed 2 copies on heavy paper, signed mine, and slid the other into a cream envelope addressed to Sunny Ridge HOA, ATN President Voss. I tucked a note in the spirit of neighborliness. "I accept your claim of shared access on these terms." I put it in their clubhouse slot and didn't have to wait long. Power wants paperwork the way a flame wants oxygen. By evening, I had a copy returned to my mailbox with Pamela's neat signature nestled inside a flourish of tilde. She didn't read the fine print because people like her hire other people to read for them, and other people had told her I was blustering. I wasn't. The next 3 days were quiet like a storm that takes inventory. Online, it was less quiet. Posts sprouted in the local groups like mold in a forgotten fridge. "Does anyone else think it's sad that Mr. Norris hates community events? Why does one man get to ruin a fundraiser?" A donut shop across town put a jar at the register with a handwritten note: "Save our trail." I donated $1 and laughed at myself for how petty felt like cardio on Thursday. I woke to the punctuation of diesel in the driveway. 2 county trucks, one marked with the Department of Environmental Quality, the other with Fish and Wildlife. The man stepping out of the first had the posture of someone who had learned to read rivers better than faces. "Mr. Norris," he said, flipping a badge. "I'm Garza. We got a tip that filled dirt was placed within 50 feet of your pond." "You got eyes," I said, pointing to the ring of pale soil where the Sunset Pier had been stapled to the shore. He crouched, scooped, pressed, and grunted like the dirt had told him a secret. That's violation land, he said. You got any names? I held my hands out. I've got a logo. We walked the bank while he took pictures and wrote the kind of notes that make other people wish they'd stayed home. When he left, his partner handed me a card. Call if you see trucks again, she said. If they're not yours, we'll be theirs. That afternoon, a landscaping foreman I'd never met knocked on my door like he wanted to be forgiven for owning knuckles. He was sunburned in the way men get when they work in other people's yards. Name's Ty, he said. I laid that turf out there. Pamela told me it was HOA land. Then she texted me not to talk to you. I don't like being lied to here. He handed me a stack of printed invoices and 3 screenshots. One of them made heat climb under my collar. Don't contact owner. He is not cooperative. Install anyway tonight. Why bring me this? I asked. Because my boy fishes the corner of your pond, he said. And because I have a wife who says if I get dragged into something I'd better be on the right side of it. Your wife's a genius. He laughed once, embarrassed by his own good fortune. Don't tell her it goes to her head. I scanned the images and sent them to Eli with the subject line, Christmas. Pamela didn't back down. That night the HOA sent a blast email to the neighborhood titled a message from your board. I knew because it landed in my spam with the confidence of a sermon. It described a hostile landowner, a pattern of aggression, a campaign to dismantle community joy. It attached a bill for $4,500 in event losses and advised homeowners that assessments might be necessary. The last paragraph read like, threat and perfume, we will not be intimidated. I printed the email and tacked it on the community board by the mailbox cluster. Right below it, I added a single page, laminated like a scout project, an excerpt of Ty's screenshot with one line highlighted in yellow, do not contact owner. Install anyway. By Saturday morning the photo had traveled further than a rumor in a hair salon. Faces in the coffee shop lingered on me half a second longer. A woman at the feed store murmured, saw your sign, as if I had posted a weather report. A man I recognized from 2 streets over suspenders, a hat that told lies about fishing, stopped me at the door and looked at his shoes like they might know what to say. Name's Estevan, he said. Treasurer for the HOA was, I guess I can't do this anymore. They told me that easement was real. What changed your mind? I asked. He tapped the laminated quote on his phone. We lie when we think. The truth will be expensive. I don't accept the math anymore. He handed me a manila envelope. It felt like another verdict. Inside, meeting minutes, bank transfers, a spreadsheet labeled Community Enhancement Fund that was, in practice, a ledger of event deposits routed through a shell company with a mailing address that matched the developer's suite. There it was, the found money of a Gala that never paid the piper. Keep your copy, I said. You might need it. The following Tuesday, 3 sedans with state plates parked in front of the HOA clubhouse. Men and women in work clothes that happened to be suits walked in carrying binders the color of bad news. The Department of Revenue had arrived with the energy of an audit that didn't plan to apologize. Across the street, Pamela watched from her porch in sunglasses like the sun was the problem. She pretended not to look. Our eyes met and agreed we didn't like the same songs. Eli called at noon. You busy? He asked, casual in the way you talk when you've just set fire to a different room. I'm gardening with gasoline. Ted, then you'll love this, he said. They accepted your agricultural license. I just got it back stamped and filed by the HOA secretary. The clause you tucked in. The one that voids it if they use it for anything else. It's going to play like a drum. What about the fake easement? We've got Grace, we've got Lena, and we've got a developer login that smells like fraud. Judge will hear us on an injunction Friday, where something that says I miss my father and also I brought a hammer. On Thursday, local press finally did the thing they should have done before believing a newsletter. They asked questions they planned to print answers to. A column appeared titled, Is Our Trail Really Ours? It was cautious, like someone tiptoeing across the idea of liability. But it named the developer and it cited the Department of Revenue, and it mentioned the environmental agency with a quote about fill dirt where fish lay eggs. The photo at the top showed my field with the stage mark still pressed into the grass like a bruise. You hope the shirt covers. Pamela countered with a video, filmed in her backyard where everything looked expensive except the apology. She talked about togetherness and tradition and one man's anger. She used my name like a spell. Comments divided into tribes and sharpened sticks. I turned off my phone and fixed the hinge on the barn door. My father and I had hung the year the roof leaked like a confession. Scout watched from the step with an expression that said he preferred the part of life that included sticks and meat. Friday came like a courthouse heartbeat. The room was full of neighbors who were suddenly neutral, reporters who wanted a soundbite, and board members who had decided to attend because silence looked like guilt on a calendar. Pamela sat with her counsel, in a jacket the color of expensive clouds. I carried my grandfather's pocket knife because habit is the closest thing to inheritance. I can afford. The judge was a woman with a haircut that meant she cut her own through law school. She looked at the stack of paper like it had personally disappointed her. Eli did what Eli does and rolled the story without adjectives. He started at the fence line and ended at the clause. He entered the agricultural license into the record and let the room read the trigger like a secret. He called Grace, who held the fake easement, up to the light and said, with a kindness that still tasted like judgment, "No ma'am, that's not Ellen." You heckled Lena, who talked about staging systems and logins and the way real records don't get uploaded by companies with a P.O. box across from a deli. Pamela's attorney tried to resurrect what was already dead. He said community as if the word meant property, as if saying neighbor with enough sugar makes it taste like deed. The judge raised a hand. "Mrs. Voss," she said, "who signed this agricultural license?" Pamela glanced at the paper, like reading her own signature might turn into someone else's. "I did," she said. "Did you read the terms?" "I did," she lied. The judge's mouth found a line that could mean sympathy or smirk. "Then you knew that any use outside agriculture voids the document and triggers damages." Pamela's eyes did a small, private blink. "The kind people save for when math starts to hurt. And this conservation easement," the judge continued, "the one with the wrong middle name, the gel pen, and the upload from a developer account, please explain why my clerk can't find it in the book from 15 years ago. Pamela's attorney objected to the tone. The judge overruled the objection to gravity. "We are not here to punish a bake sale," the judge said. "We are here because the law is not a potluck. You don't bring whatever you like and call it supper." She turned to Eli. "Injunction granted. Cease and desist on all uses of Mr. Norris's land by the HOA. Temporary restraining order against events within 200 feet of his boundary pending a full hearing. And Mr. Norris, that clause you wrote, it sings as of your opponent's signature. Any non-agricultural use is void. Damages will be calculated." Pamela exhaled like the room had taken something from her she hadn't realized she'd kept. "Eli wasn't done. One more," he said, sliding the laminated quote across the rail like a card you only use if you like winning. The judge read, "Do not contact owner. Install anyway," she sighed. The way a teacher sighs when it's the last period and someone still believes they can talk their way to a passing grade. "We'll discuss sanctions at the full hearing," she said. "Mrs. Voss, you and your board will preserve all communications related to this matter. If I learn that anything has been destroyed, I will teach you the difference between community leadership and contempt." Outside, microphones found faces. They asked me how it felt. I told them what my father told me the day he lifted the first fence post on the back acre. "Land remembers who loves it," I said. "So do courts." The full hearing took a month to walk into the room and an hour to walk out with a judgment that turned my knees into furniture. The judge declared the conservation easement a fiction. She described the upload as an attempt to launder rights through imagery. She ordered the HOA to withdraw any claim to my land, assessed fines for the environmental violation, referred the developer to the Attorney General for review, and approved liquidated damages under my little trap of a clause to the tune of $680,000. She appointed a receiver to manage the HOA's finances until the board could demonstrate they were not a shell for a shell. She gave Pamela a timeline to produce records, then gave her a look that felt like a countdown. Pamela resigned the next day. She didn't do a video. The neighborhood did what humans have done since we learned to plant sticks and hope it survived its own leadership. People who hadn't looked me in the eye asked if I'd like to join the gardening committee. I politely declined to help anyone decide on mulch. Children started using the path on the edge of my field again, the one that's always been there and doesn't need a sign to exist. Ty brought his boy to fish the corner of the pond, and when the kid pulled out a bluegill the size of a baseball glove, he shouted the way the world should always be surprised by something small and alive. I left the banner stakes in the ground, where the gala had tried to happen, not as a monument to anger, as a reminder that holes can hold something better than regret. With a neighbor kid named June swinging a sledge that weighed near as much as she did, we knocked the stakes out and planted persimmon saplings along the line. The first time I watered them, Scout shoved his head into the stream and came up snarling at the spray like it had personally insulted his dignity. I laughed loud enough that a bird took off from the fence and scolded me from a safer wire on the south side of the barn because even hate deserves a shadow. I set a stone, plain and honest. The chisel made letters that didn't need a lawyer. This land feeds mouths, not egos. I thought that was the end. Then a letter arrived from the Department of Revenue, stamped with the kind of authority you don't frame in a kitchen. It itemized unpaid taxes by the HOA on event income for the last 3 years and assigned penalties that would make a developer schedule a meeting with their god. I called Eli. He chuckled, a sound like a well-tuned hinge. "Sometimes," he said, "the good guys get the paperwork." I didn't write a book. I'm not that kind of man. But I did write a note and nail it above the feed bins where I could see it every morning before the sun told me what kind of day we were having. It said, "Don't forget who you're feeding." On a Sunday in June, the neighborhood came without a sign-up sheet. No tents, no speeches, just people. We grilled on the flat rock by the water. Mrs. Alvarez brought empathy that made the teenagers forget their phones for entire minutes. Estevan taught my niece how to fly a kite like he was passing a family recipe. Ty and his boy cut a tire swing from a rope that could have towed a truck. A fisherman down the bank swore, quietly and inventively, when he lost a lure to something, "That owns this pond more than we ever will." Pamela didn't come. The developer sent a representative named Greg who wore sunglasses on his head and gilt on his shoes. He stood on the road for a while, practiced his apology on the air, and got back in his car to take it to someone who might pay him to deliver it for real. At dusk, June's kite finally surrendered to the way light leaves. The wind put its hands in its pockets and went home. I looked at the saplings along the old stake line and pictured them a few years from now, feeding deer and children and anyone with a mouth and an opinion about sweetness. Scout leaned on my leg, exactly the weight of an honest day, ready to go in. I asked him. He didn't move. I watched the last breath of sun slide off the water and felt the land breathe with me, not with relief, with recognition. The kind that says, "We remember." The kind that promises to keep remembering long after the fog machines stop and the banners fall into the kind of silence that grows good things. Flipped the porch light on the way inside because I was done flipping switches for other people's parties. The bulb hummed like a bee that likes its job. I hung my hat on the hook my father used and listened to the house settle. I poured water into Scout's bowl and cracked a beer I'd been promising myself since the first string light stabbed my grass. The beer tasted like forgiveness and fence posts and a heat that can be trusted. Out in the dark, where the Gala had pretended to be real, the earth held the memory of stakes and the promise of trees. It would take both to make the story true. I set my boots by the door and left my socks on because the floor. I still remembered my father's steps and I liked the idea of my feet learning his rhythm. In the morning, I'd water the persimmons and take a walk past the sign that doesn't need me to read it to know it's right. I slept like someone whose name is back where it belongs on the deed, the way it's whispered by wind across a pond. Nobody else gets to rename